Utah voters sent a loud message on Election Day. Now we're waiting to see how the legislature might respond. That's one of the top priorities for Alliance for a Better Utah as we head into the session. Lauren Simpson is the organization's policy director. Lauren, great to have you with us. Thanks for being here on the show.
Thank you.
Let's start with Proposition 2. We already know the legislature modified it. So as we head into the session, what are you watching for there? That would be medical cannabis.
So we'll definitely be keeping an eye on changes to any of the propositions. We're not expecting a ton of new changes to be made to Proposition 2, if any, because like you mentioned, the legislature has already essentially repealed and replaced the original proposition that was passed by the voters, and now we have a compromise bill. So any changes would upset the balance of that compromise. So we'll be definitely keeping an eye to see on if anything happens there.
Okay, let's move on to Proposition 3, Medicaid expansion. It passed pretty wide margin here in the state of Utah. I'm hearing from the governor there might be an appetite to modify it. There's also a bill out there that would totally repeal it, but it doesn't sound like that's going to happen. So as lawmakers, take a look at that and look at possibly changing it, what's your message?
So our main priority is that the legislature uphold the will of the people. Utah had record turnout in the 2018 midterm election and a lot of first-time voters, and we really want our elected officials to uphold the will of the people and respect the law that was passed by the people. So we'll be opposing any substantive changes to Medicaid expansion, which is something that advocates in the state have worked for a number of years.
Some of the ideas being tossed around we'll get into would be like a work requirement possibly. Also, there's some concern over how to pay for it. So they're looking at that. As far as a taxing entity and being able to pay for it, bringing the money in, do you guys support any changes there?
I mean, I haven't looked into the nuts and bolts on how the policy would play out. However, the proposition that was passed by the voters was very transparent, and it was very upfront that it included a tax component. So that was never something that was intended to be figured out on the back end. That the voters knew at the time that they voted for Proposition 3 that it would involve a tax increase.
Let's move on to Proposition 4, an independent redistricting commission. We're hearing that that's likely to be taken up by the legislature as well.
We're hearing that as well, and we're also hearing about possible litigation brought either by the legislature or by outside parties. As for the particular changes that members of the legislature might try and make to Proposition 4, we don't know the specifics on that yet, so at this point it's mostly speculation, although we are expecting some sort of bill that would maybe shift the balance to more heavily favor the majority party in the state, or perhaps to reduce transparency if the legislature does reject the independent commission's maps.
Let's talk about the initiative process in general. A huge year for the ballot initiative. You could call it the year of the ballot initiative. What do you want the state legislature to know when they talk about potentially changing that, like the signature threshold and removing signatures? What will you be watching for?
So, well, on the one hand, we're hearing rumors that there might be some challenges to make Utah's initiative process even more stringent. And Utah's initiative process is already notoriously difficult. For a ballot initiative to even make it on the ballot, it requires 113,000 signatures. That's really hard, and it's also why all of our ballot initiatives require a lot of money, because there's a geographic requirement as well to gather signatures from 26 of Utah's 29 counties. So we'll be opposed to anything that makes it more difficult for the people to pass their own legislation by getting on the ballot. One good bill that we're hearing about would unify the dates for collecting signatures and for those signatures to be removed on the ballot.
We definitely saw that with Count My Vote initiative. All right, we will be watching. Appreciate your time, and we'll catch up with you during the session as well. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Coming up, before he was even sworn in, Utah Senator Mitt Romney turned the political world upside down with an op-ed aimed at President Trump. We'll break it down with our panel.